Forest Mysteries. The gray sky loomed low over the tangled canopy, casting a muted pallor across the snow-blanketed forest. The biting chill of dawn cut through Elena's wool coat as she stepped onto the porch of her remote cabin, her boots crunching softly on the frozen ground. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint rustle of wind weaving through the pines. Shadows of trees, heavy with winter's remnants, stretched into the overcast sky, their jagged outlines stark against the dull light. Elena paused, her gaze drifting toward the woods, her senses sharpening. The familiar quiet was disturbed by a subtle disturbance, an irregular pattern in the snow, faint impressions pressed deep into the white, hurried and unsteady. Her eyes narrowed, instinct telling her something was wrong. She reached for her lantern, feeling the cold metal rough beneath her fingers, and flicked it on with practiced ease. Its weak glow cast a dull circle, revealing the fresh tracks leading into the thicket. She knelt slowly, brushing away a few stubborn snowflakes to examine the prints. They were inconsistent, uneven, signs of a creature in distress or fleeing. Her brow furrowed as she traced the path deeper into the woods, the footprints spiraling left, weaving into denser undergrowth. The disturbed snow around them hinted at a frantic struggle, claws or paws tearing through the crust. A faint, almost imperceptible sound reached her ears, a soft, trembling whimper. It sliced through the morning hush, stirring a flicker of unease within her. Her pulse quickened, and her grip on the lantern tightened. She hesitated, torn between caution and compassion. The sound seemed too human, raw, vulnerable, edged with pain or fear. It beckoned her to investigate further. Her mind raced, recalling her past encounters with the wilderness's unpredictable violence. Was it an injured animal, a lost traveler, or was something darker? The whimper grew closer, more desperate, echoing from beyond the dense thicket. Elena's instincts urged her forward, yet her cautious nature made her pause behind a low shrub, peering through tangled branches. Through the weak glow of her lantern, she glimpsed movement. A small, trembling shape curled against the snow, shivering uncontrollably. Its form was indistinct at first, but then she saw it clearly. A tiny creature, perhaps a young fox or a stray dog, its fur stained with dark patches. Its breathing was ragged, eyes wide and glistening with pain. Her breath caught as compassion flooded her. She knew from her experience that wounds in this cold could be fatal without immediate aid. The creature's soft gasp confirmed her suspicion. This was no ordinary animal in distress. It was suffering helpless. Elena moved carefully, kneeling and extending a hand toward the trembling form. The creature flinched, eyes flickering with terror and pain. She noticed a deep gash along its side, the dark stains spreading. Her heart clenched. This was more than just a minor injury. It was life-threatening. She considered her options. Leave it to the mercy of the forest, trusting nature to take its course, or risk her safety to save it. Her decision was driven by the faint memory of her days as a healer, where compassion often meant risking everything. She gently touched the creature's side, feeling the feverish heat beneath the damp fur, and whispered soothing words, trying to calm its trembling. Reaching into her coat pocket, she grasped a small vial of herbal tincture, her emergency remedy, knowing it might be the only thing standing between life and death. Carefully, she loosened her scarf, wrapping her arms around the fragile creature to shield it from the cold. Her fingers moved delicately, applying the tincture to the wound, while her eyes stayed alert for any sign of worsening condition. Suddenly, a rustling noise behind her made her tense. She turned her head slowly, scanning the shadows. The wind shifted, stirring the branches, but she caught a glimpse of movement, something small and frantic, darting just beyond her line of sight. Her heart hammered as she realized she might not be alone. A faint growl vibrated through the trees, an animal lurking nearby, perhaps attracted by the commotion. Elena's mind raced. Was this predator drawn by the scent of blood? Or was it another injured creature seeking help? She tightened her grip on the tiny form, her senses heightened. She decided to move carefully, not to frighten the animal further. Lifting the creature gently, she tucked it into her coat, shielding it from the cold. She then backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the shadows, listening for any sign of threat. Her cautious retreat was interrupted by a sudden snap of a branch, a reminder that danger lurked close. As she retreated toward the cabin, her thoughts churned. The injured animal in her arms was a new burden, a reminder of the unpredictable cruelty of the wilderness. Yet, it also ignited a spark of purpose. This fragile life depended on her now. The encounter shifted her perspective. She was no longer merely an observer, but a participant in the forest's silent struggle for survival. Reaching the safety of her porch, Elena hurried inside, closing the door behind her. She set the tiny creature on a soft cloth and began tending to its wounds more thoroughly, gathering her supplies. Her heart pounded, not just from exertion, but from a newfound resolve to protect this vulnerable life, no matter the risks. As the fire crackled to life in the hearth, she looked out the window, her mind already calculating her next steps. The forest's secrets had deepened, and she knew that her understanding of its dangers and her role within it had just expanded. The quiet was no longer just silence, but a warning, a promise that her journey into the wilderness's darker truths was only beginning. By the time night fell, Elena's world had subtly shifted. She had uncovered a new mystery, a wounded creature, a lurking predator, and a fragile hope. Her knowledge had grown, and her sense of purpose sharpened. The forest's cold indifference remained, but now she saw herself as part of its ongoing story, committed to defending the helpless amid the shadows. Elena moved cautiously through the snow-covered forest, her breath visible in the biting winter air. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the faint creak of frozen branches and her own measured footsteps. Every sense was alert, her eyes darting between the shadows cast by the sparse trees, ears strained for any sign of movement. She clutched her coat tighter, instinct telling her to stay hidden. Yet her gaze kept returning to the small, trembling form beneath her hands. She knelt beside the injured pup, its tiny body rigid with shock and pain. Its fur was torn, blood seeping through the ragged edges of the wound. The creature's frantic shivering was a stark reminder of its vulnerability. Elena's fingers brushed the torn fabric, feeling the sticky warmth of blood and the uneven texture of the injury. A soft whimper escaped the pup, muffled and trembling, tugging painfully at her conscience. She had stumbled upon this scene unexpectedly, an abandoned trap, rusted and half buried beneath a mound of snow and dead leaves, its jaws still clenched around a fragile limb. Her eyes widened with horror. The animal's wide, pleading eyes searched hers desperately, silently begging for help. Elena's heart clenched. She knew she couldn't leave it to die. Her decision was driven by a mixture of compassion and necessity. Carefully, she retrieved her pocket knife, its blade catching a glint of pale sunlight filtering through the branches. She hesitated only a moment before sliding the cold metal beneath the rusted latch. With deliberate pressure, she pried the trap open, the metal screeching sharply in the still air. The jaws parted, releasing the pup's leg with a jarring snap. Elena gently eased the tiny creature out, cradling it against her chest to prevent it from slipping away. The pup's body jerked violently, claws digging in her coat as it tried to recoil, but she held firm. Her mind raced. What if the adult pack was nearby? Could they sense her mercy and attack? Yet abandoning the pup was unthinkable. The animal's life depended on her now. She pressed her hand to her coat pocket, retrieving a small vial of antiseptic and a clean cloth she kept tucked away for emergencies. Her fingers trembled as she poured the antiseptic over the wound, the liquid hissing and bubbling as it soaked into the fur and flesh. The bitter scent filled her nostrils, a stark reminder of the animal's suffering. She worked swiftly, dabbing at the bleeding with the cloth, trying to slow the relentless flow of blood. The pup whimpered softly, eyelids fluttering as it sought her face for reassurance. Elena's grip tightened around the fragile body, her heart pounding with a mixture of protectiveness and dread. She knew she needed to act fast. The cold was sapping the creature's strength, and exposure could be deadly. Unwrapping her scarf, she fashioned a makeshift bandage, carefully wrapping it around the injured leg. She pressed the cloth firmly to stem the bleeding, then gently lifted the pup, wrapping it snugly in the fabric. She tucked the bundle close to her chest, feeling the rapid flutter of its heartbeat beneath her palm. Her instincts told her to move quickly. Every second increased the risk of detection or attack. A gust of wind swept through the trees, causing her to shiver. She cast a wary glance into the surrounding woods, her senses heightened. Shadows shifted behind the trunks, and every faint sound seemed amplified. An owl's distant call, the crack of a branch under the weight of snow. Her mind spun with options. Should she retreat deeper into the forest, seeking shelter, or attempt to find a safer spot nearby? The danger of predators was real, yet leaving the pup behind was impossible. Suddenly, she caught a faint sound, a distant snap, a rustle, her body tensing instinctively. Her eyes darted toward the shadows, searching for movement. She whispered softly to the pup, trying to keep her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The woods remained eerily quiet, as if holding its breath, awaiting her next move. She adjusted her coat and prepared to carry the fragile bundle away at the slightest sign of threat. Her mind weighed her options, moving into denser cover or seeking a vantage point where she could observe without being seen. Every decision carried risk, but hesitation was not an option. Her resolve hardened. She would protect this life, no matter the danger. With careful, deliberate steps, she began to shift her position, keeping her eyes alert for any signs of pursuit. The snow beneath her muffled her movements, but her ears caught every sound: an owl's distant call, the faint crack of ice. She knew she couldn't stay long in this spot. The longer she lingered, the higher the chance that the pack or other predators would detect her presence. Her senses sharpened, and she moved with purpose, determined to find a safer refuge. As she started to retreat, a sudden noise made her freeze. A branch snapping under the weight of snow, or perhaps a distant howl. Her grip on the pup tightened, her breath held tight in her chest. She whispered reassurance, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. The forest remained silent again, but the tension lingered. She pressed on, her steps slow but steady, the weight of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. She knew that her act of mercy might soon be discovered, and that her path forward was fraught with peril. Yet, her conviction was unshaken. She would not abandon this helpless creature. Not today. Finally, she reached a denser thicket, where the snow was deeper and the shadows thicker. She paused, listening intently, then carefully lowered the bundle into a hollow among the roots, covering it with snow and leaves. Her eyes lingered on the small form. Then she straightened, her mind already planning her next move. She had bought the pup a chance, fragile, fleeting, but real. As she stepped back into the shadows, a faint gust of wind carried the scent of cold and snow. She knew she couldn't stay long. Her senses remained alert, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. She had learned something vital today. Even in the harshest winter, compassion could ignite a glimmer of hope. She would carry this knowledge with her. As she moved deeper into the forest, her silhouette merging with the darkness, ready for whatever came next. Elena sat silently in her cabin, the dying embers of the fire casting flickering shadows across the rough wooden walls. Outside, the forest stretched into darkness, heavy with silence save for the occasional whisper of wind threading through the trees. The cold seeped through the thin walls, gnawing at her skin, but her attention was fixed on the small, trembling pup curled against her chest, blood-matted fur clinging to its fragile frame. She carefully brushed snow from the pup's coat, her fingers trembling with fatigue and worry. Every shallow breath it took seemed like a fragile miracle, a testament to its resilience. The faint glow from the dying fire flickered, casting uncertain light on her tense face. The night pressed heavily against the cabin, shadows dancing beyond the small window, where the wind's moan hinted at unseen dangers lurking just beyond sight. Suddenly, a faint scent wafted through the air, a mixture of damp earth and something sharper, more primal. Elena's senses sharpened. Her heart rate quickened as she pressed her ear against the door, listening intently. Outside, the woods seemed to hold their breath, the usual nocturnal sounds muffled or absent. Her mind raced, trying to decipher the subtle cues. Was it just the wind or something more. A faint rustling sound near the porch made her freeze. Her grip on the battered flashlight tightened instinctively, and she flicked it on, the beam piercing the darkness with a narrow slit of light. Shadows flickered across the porch and surrounding trees. Her eyes darted to the makeshift weapon beside her, a sturdy, sharpened stick she'd found earlier. Clenching her fingers around it out of habit, though her mind knew it might be insufficient. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a sharper, more pungent scent. Damp earth mingled with a metallic tang that made her stomach tighten. Her breath hitched as her gaze returned to the window. A shadow flickered swiftly across the glass, just beyond her line of sight. Her pulse hammered in her chest, each beat echoing loudly in her ears. She steadied her trembling hands, trying to suppress the rising panic. She pressed her ear against the door again, listening for movement. Silence stretched, thick and oppressive. The only sounds were her shallow breaths and the faint creak of the cabin settling. Every muscle tensed as she strained her senses, waiting for any sign of threat. A sudden crack overhead made her flinch, an old branch breaking under the weight of the wind. Her grip on the stick tightened further. The shadows outside seemed to shift, and her eyes caught a fleeting glimpse of movement, something darting just beyond the window's edge. Her mind raced, weighing her options. Should she stay silent and hope the threat passes, or call out, risking revealing her position? Her instincts urged caution, but her concern for the pup's safety pushed her toward action. She moved closer to the door, her hand hovering over the latch, her ears straining for any sound. The wind howled louder now, rattling the thin walls, making the cabin shudder. Outside, the darkness seemed alive, the forest breathing with unseen presence. Her thoughts flickered with possibilities. An animal attracted by the scent of blood, a lost traveler, or something more sinister lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, a faint scraping noise echoed from the porch, slow, deliberate. Elena froze, her heart pounding painfully. Her grip on the stick tightened, and she pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp. The sound persisted, like something heavy being dragged or shifted. She stared at the latch, her mind torn between locking it tighter or preparing for confrontation. In that suspended moment, her eyes caught a flicker of movement again, closer this time, just beyond the window. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, each pulse a reminder of her vulnerability. She instinctively reached for her weapon, her fingers trembling slightly as she clenched it tightly. Her gaze flicked between the door and the shadows outside, her mind racing. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every second felt fragile, like a thread holding her in place. The wind howled again, louder and more violent, rattling the cabin and making the structure shudder. Outside, the forest seemed to breathe, alive and watching, waiting. Elena's thoughts sharpened. She could remain silent, hoping the intruder or creature would move on, or she could shout, risking detection, but possibly scaring away whatever was outside. Her concern for the pup's fragile life pressed her to act, but her survival instincts warned her of the danger. Finally, she made a decision. With a steadying breath, she stepped back from the door, pressing her ear once more against the wood. Her voice was low, cautious yet resolute. "Who's there?" The words dissolved into the night, swallowed by the oppressive silence. No reply came, only the distant, mournful howl of a wolf, echoing through the woods and reminding her of the wild that lurked just beyond her shelter. Her eyes narrowed, muscles tense. She knew she couldn't ignore the possibility that danger was near, whether from the forest or an unknown intruder. Her grip on the stick tightened further, knuckles blanching. Her mind spun with questions. Should she wait, stay alert, and hope the threat passes? Or prepare to defend herself, risking a confrontation? The shadows beyond the window shifted once more, and she realized with stark clarity that her quiet refuge was no longer safe. Something watched her from the darkness, patient and silent. In that moment, Elena understood that her vigilance was her only shield. Whatever was outside, beast or human, would reveal itself soon enough. She had to be ready to face it, whatever the cost. Her eyes flicked to the door, then to the shadows, her senses strained to catch the slightest movement. The night held its breath. She knew now that her solitude was a fragile illusion. The forest silence was deceptive, hiding threats that could strike at any moment. Her only certainty was that her awareness must sharpen. Her survival depended on it. The pup whimpered softly, a fragile reminder of what was at stake. As the wind surged once more, Elena's grip on her weapon tightened. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat a warning. She had learned long ago that danger often came unannounced from the shadows we least expect. Tonight, she was no longer merely waiting. She was prepared to confront whatever emerged from the darkness. Her eyes fixed on the window, she saw movement again, this time closer, more deliberate. Her breath caught. The forest was alive, watching her, testing her resolve. She straightened, muscles coiled, ready for whatever might come. Her mind was clear. Her quiet sanctuary was gone, replaced by a battlefield of shadows and whispers. In that moment, Elena realized her only true defense was her awareness, her unyielding vigilance. Whatever lurked outside, whether beast or man, would soon make itself known, and she had to be ready to meet it with resolve and courage, no matter what the dawn might bring. The wind's howling intensified as icy gusts whipped around the small cabin, snowflakes swirling in chaotic eddies. Outside, the trees shuddered violently, their skeletal branches groaning under the relentless assault. Elena hurried to the door, her breath forming fleeting clouds in the frigid air. Her fingers trembled as she grasped the cold, rough wood, pushing against it with determined strength. The old latch protested with a squeal, but she forced it open slightly, shoving a torn woolen blanket into the crack to reinforce the seal. She knew this temporary fix wouldn't hold long, but it was all she could manage in the moment. A shiver coursed through her, not solely from the biting cold, but from a gnawing awareness that the storm was only escalating. Darkness was rapidly engulfing the landscape, shadows stretching and merging into the blackness beyond the flimsy shelter. She grabbed her lantern, fumbling to ignite it with shaky hands. The flickering flame cast uneven patches of light on the frost-covered walls, revealing the cabin's fragile interior. The windows rattled ominously as gusts slammed into the structure, the glass trembling within its frames. Every powerful gust seemed to carry an echo, an indistinct whisper or distant howl, as if the wind itself carried secrets from the dark woods. Her eyes darted to the small window, scanning the swirling whiteness beyond. Visibility had dropped to mere feet, transforming the outside world into a swirling, opaque mass. She sensed that the forest's hidden threats lurked beneath this white shroud, concealed by the storm's fury. Her chest tightened with a mixture of dread and resolve. The fragile piece she had carved out here felt increasingly fragile, threatened by the unyielding power of nature's wrath. She moved back toward the door, clutching the handle tightly. The door groaned as the wind pressed against it, the wood protesting under the force. Her knuckles whitened as she pressed her palm against the rough surface, bracing herself. She briefly considered bolstering the windows further, but the blankets and furniture pressed against them were already strained to their limits. Her breathing grew shallow, her mind racing with unspoken fears. What if the storm brought something more sinister? The temperature inside was plummeting. Her breath fogged in the tight space, and her body instinctively curled into itself. The storm's noise drowned out any distant sounds. No footsteps, no calls, only the relentless, primal howl of the wind. It seeped into her bones, awakening memories of loneliness she thought she had long buried. The storm seemed to whisper of ancient fears, stirring a sense of vulnerability she couldn't ignore. She lit a small fire in the stove, the weak flame flickering against the cold. The crackling would offer a fragile warmth, but it was insufficient to dispel the deep chill that gnawed at her bones. Her gaze drifted to a faded photograph hanging on the wall, a reminder of days long gone, of people she'd left behind in her pursuit of solitude. A pang of guilt twisted in her stomach, as if her isolation had summoned this storm as punishment. Minutes stretched into an eternity as she sat on a battered chair, clutching a mug of cooled tea. Outside, the wind's shrieks intensified, battering the cabin like a chorus of angry spirits. Snow piled against the walls, obliterating footprints and any sign of recent activity. The outside world was a featureless white void, silent save for the storm's fury. The sense of being watched persisted, a prickling at the back of her neck. Suddenly, a violent gust slammed into the cabin, causing it to shudder. The door jerked violently, the latch threatening to break free. Elena leapt to her feet, instinctively gripping the handle once more, her heart pounding. Her knuckles went white as she pressed her body against the door, anchoring herself against the violent assault. For a moment, she wondered if the storm might tear the cabin apart, if the walls could withstand the onslaught. She paused, listening intently. The howling outside seemed to carry more than just wind, an almost rhythmic guttural sound that sent a shiver down her spine. Was it a distant wolf pack, or something else entirely? Her mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Her fingers trembled but held firm on the latch, refusing to let the door give way. Then, suddenly, the wind's fury diminished briefly, leaving an oppressive silence. Elena's ears strained, her senses heightened. In that eerie stillness, she detected a faint, deliberate movement, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present beyond the woods. Her breath hitched. The storm had concealed more than just weather. It had hidden something darker, something watching her. Her gaze returned to the snow-covered window, trying to pierce the swirling whiteness. The storm's chaos masked any signs of life outside, but her instinct told her she was not alone. A cold dread seeped into her bones, reminding her of her vulnerability in this frozen wilderness. She gripped the lantern tighter, her knuckles white, as if that act alone could bolster her defenses. Time blurred as she sat in the dim glow, listening to the wind's relentless cry. The cabin was both sanctuary and trap, its fragile walls a barrier against the outside world, yet also a prison. She knew she couldn't stay forever. Eventually, she would have to confront whatever lurked beyond her shelter. But for now, she remained rooted, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on her shoulders. As hours passed, the storm's intensity waxed and waned, the whiteout outside blurring the boundary between safety and danger. Elena's thoughts oscillated between hope and dread. The storm had obscured the outside world, but it also revealed her own fragility, her solitude, her fears, her resolve. Somewhere within that chaos, a truth lay hidden just beyond her reach. Then, without warning, a new sound emerged, distant, muffled, yet unmistakably alive. A faint, rhythmic thumping echoed through the frozen forest. Her heart skipped a beat. The storm's fury had temporarily concealed everything, but it had also exposed a fragile vulnerability. The night was far from over. The storm, in its wild, destructive manner, had revealed that beneath her isolated refuge lurked something else, something stirring, something potentially dangerous. Elena clenched her fists, her grip tightening on the lantern. Her mind raced to process this new sign. Whatever was coming, she knew she couldn't escape it. All she could do was prepare, stand firm, and hope that the storm's rage would pass before whatever lay beyond the snow and darkness found its way inside. Her senses sharpened, her body tense, as she braced herself for what might be her greatest challenge yet. Morning broke over the snow-covered branches, casting a pale, diffuse light across the silent landscape. The storm had spent itself overnight, leaving a patchwork of uneven drifts and shattered twigs scattered across the ground. Elena sat by the small window of her cabin, her eyes fixed on the untouched snow outside, where faint yet deliberate tracks had appeared amidst the pristine whiteness. The footprints seemed fresh, purposeful, evidence of recent movement through her secluded domain. She wrapped her hands around a steaming mug of tea, muscles still tense from the night's unease, and studied the trail intently. The prints were narrow, aligned in a pattern that suggested a cautious but determined creature. There were no signs of a larger predator, no dragging marks, no signs of struggle. Only a clear, deliberate passage into the forest's depths. Beside her, the pup stirred slightly but remained silent, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Elena's gaze softened as she looked at the fragile creature. Its small body trembled from the cold, yet it was alive, and that spark of vitality ignited a flicker of hope within her. A sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin's worn walls, stirring the snow outside into swirling flurries. She hesitated, then slowly pushed herself upright, joints protesting after the cold night. The tracks beckoned, and despite the doubts gnawing at her mind, a quiet resolve took root. She reached for her worn coat and sturdy boots, leather stiff with age but reliable. Her hand closed around her flashlight, its beam flickering from the cold, and she grabbed a small, sharpened stick, more a tool than a weapon, yet enough to keep her alert. Stepping outside, she paused briefly, inhaling the crisp, icy air, tasting the cold on her tongue. The ground crunched softly beneath her steps as she moved toward the trail. Her eyes flicked from one footprint to another, noting subtle differences in depth and spacing. The snow remained pristine in most places, but where the creature's paws pressed down, the surface was disturbed, pressed, broken, or smeared with a faint trail of displaced powder. As she followed the trail, her senses sharpened. Every sound, the distant crack of a branch, the whisper of wind, amplified in her awareness. The woods seemed alive with silent observation. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, and the trees stood like silent sentinels, watching her progress with an almost unnatural stillness. The footprints dipped into a small hollow, then veered sharply left, heading toward a dense thicket of tangled undergrowth. Elena paused, crouching low to examine the fresh impressions. The trail briefly disappeared beneath a fallen branch, then reappeared on the other side, as if the creature had leapt over the obstacle with ease. A faint, earthy scent drifted on the cold air, wild, primal, unmistakably animal. She inhaled deeply, trying to decipher its origin, her mind racing through possibilities. Was it a wolf, a fox, or something less predictable? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Her eyes flicked toward the darker shadows where the trees thickened, the darkness seeming to pulse with a barely perceptible movement. She tightened her grip on the stick, feeling its rough surface bite into her palm. The forest around her was eerily silent. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, only the whisper of snowflakes settling into the branches. Elena hesitated, weighing her options. The trail was fresh, promising an encounter, either with the creature or with whatever else lurked in the woods. Her instinct urged her forward, but caution rooted her in place. She knew the forest could hide dangers as easily as secrets. Suddenly, a gust of wind caused a cascade of snow to fall from the branches overhead, momentarily obscuring her view. When the snow settled, the shadows flickered again, subtly different from before. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe steadily, steadying her nerves. She pressed on, her footsteps muffled by the snow, each step deliberate, each movement calculated. The trail wound deeper into the forest, where the trees grew closer, their dark silhouettes forming a twisting maze. The narrow path was bordered by tangled bushes and fallen logs, creating a labyrinth that felt both protective and threatening. As she advanced, a faint sound reached her ears, a soft, almost inaudible crack, like a twig snapping under weight. She froze instinctively, senses sharpening. Her eyes darted around, scanning the shadows. Nothing was visible, yet her skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes watching her. From her right, a faint rustling, leaves brushing against each other in a fleeting gust, made her turn sharply, holding her breath. She listened intently, but the sound vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the whisper of the wind. Her grip on the stick tightened unconsciously, ready for whatever might emerge. The footprints led toward a dense thicket where the snow was slightly more disturbed. She debated whether to follow or retreat, her mind torn between curiosity and caution. Yet, an instinct deeper than reason urged her onward, to see further, to understand what was moving through her woods. She carefully stepped over a fallen branch, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. The shadows lengthened as the trees thickened, forming a tunnel of darkness that seemed to swallow the narrow path. The faint scent grew stronger, wilder, more primal, hinting at something ancient and fierce lurking nearby. Suddenly, a distant howl shattered the silence. Sharp, piercing, unnatural. Elena's heart lurched, and her hand instinctively pressed against her chest for a moment before she forced herself to steady her breathing. The sound was neither threatening nor reassuring. It was a reminder that she was no longer alone in this wilderness. Her gaze lingered on the trail, then on the shifting shadows. Whatever was watching her, it was close, perhaps just beyond the next tree or hidden behind a thick trunk. Her decision was made. She would follow the trail further, despite the whispers of fear and doubt echoing in her mind. Drawing a deep breath, she pressed forward, each step deliberate, each movement bringing her closer to the unknown. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, and somewhere deep in the woods, something observed silently, patiently. The forest held its secrets tightly, but Elena was determined to uncover at least one more piece, no matter the cost. As she moved deeper into the trees, her awareness sharpened. The faint scent intensified, mingling with the cold air, hinting at a presence more feral than she dared admit. Her grip on the stick tightened again, and her eyes flicked toward the shadows, searching for movement. A sudden gust swept through the branches, causing a flurry of snow to whirl around her. She paused, listening. The forest was eerily still, save for the faint crack of a twig or the distant cry that had just echoed. Her heart pounded, yet she pressed on, her resolve hardening. In the distance, a faint glow flickered, perhaps the remnants of a sunrise struggling to pierce the thick canopy. Elena's mind raced. Was it a sign of hope or a warning? She knew she had to decide quickly. The trail was leading her toward a place she had never dared to venture before, and the stakes were higher than ever. The shadows seemed to pulse with life, and she could feel unseen eyes tracking her every move. Her instincts told her to retreat, to wait, but her curiosity and growing desperation pushed her forward. She was no longer just following footprints. She was chasing answers about the creature, about herself, about the secrets hidden within these woods. Her steps grew more cautious, her senses alert to every whisper, every flicker of movement. Somewhere in the distance, the forest silence was broken by a low, guttural growl, deep, primal, unmistakably real. Elena's breath caught, and her grip on the stick tightened as she prepared to face whatever was waiting in the darkness. The trail led her into a thicker part of the woods, where the trees formed a natural barrier. She paused, listening. The growl echoed again, closer this time. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her mind remained focused. She had come too far to turn back now. A faint, flickering light appeared beyond the trees, possibly a distant campfire or a sign of life. Elena's decision was clear. She would follow the trail to its source, risking everything to uncover the truth lurking in the shadows. With steady steps, she pressed onward, her silhouette swallowed by the darkness, her senses heightened. Somewhere in the depths of the forest, something watched her silently, patiently, waiting for her to come closer. The secrets of this wilderness had yet to be fully revealed, and Elena was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. Elena's breath hitched as her foot suddenly slid on the icy patch beneath the fresh snow. Her body lurched forward instinctively, arms flailing to regain balance, but the slick surface betrayed her. Pain exploded through her thigh as she tumbled onto the frozen ground, the cold seeping through her layers and biting into her bones. Her muscles spasmed from the impact, and she gritted her teeth against the sharp sting. A gasp escaped her lips, ragged and strained, as she clutched her injured leg. The snow muffled her cry, leaving only the harsh rasp of her breath in the silent woods. Shadows flickered in her peripheral vision, shifting with the wind, blurring her sight. Her fingers trembled as she desperately reached for her pocket, fumbling with frozen fingers to grasp her phone. But her trembling hands failed her repeatedly. She tried to shift, to push herself up, but a searing wave of pain shot through her thigh, forcing her back onto the cold ground. Panic tightened its grip on her mind. The biting cold pressed against her skin, stealing warmth and making her shiver uncontrollably. Her chest heaved as she fought to steady her trembling voice, but the ache in her leg rendered her helpless. "Help!" she rasped, voice trembling with terror. The word was barely more than a whisper lost in the vast, snowy silence. She pressed her palms into the icy earth, attempting to push herself upright, but agony clamped down on her. Her muscles refused to obey, and her body felt impossibly heavy, rooted to the ground. A wave of helpless frustration washed over her, tears prickling at her eyes, threatening to spill. Her mind raced for solutions, but every thought was clouded by pain and despair. The forest around her seemed to close in, shadows stretching like claws under the moonlight. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a relentless cold that seeped into her bones, making her shiver despite her layered clothing. Her trembling fingers clawed at the snow, trying to drag herself forward, but each movement intensified the agony. Her voice cracked as she cried out, raw and desperate, the sound echoing into the silent woods. Her head fell back onto the icy ground, eyes staring upward at the dark, starless sky. Time slowed, each second dragging painfully. Her thoughts flickered to her cabin, the warmth and safety it represented, so close yet unreachable. A cold tear traced a path down her cheek, blending with the snow dusted across her face. Her body refused to respond, and despair threatened to drown her entirely. Suddenly, a faint sound broke through the stillness, branches cracking under the weight of snow, a subtle rustling nearby. Her eyes darted around wildly, searching the shadows. Her mind, dulled by pain, struggled to focus. She clutched her side in desperation, trembling as she tried to call out again, voice barely a whisper. No response came, only the oppressive silence of the forest. Her shallow breaths grew uneven, and her eyelids fluttered as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But amid the haze, a flicker of awareness ignited. She had to stay conscious, had to cling to life. The snow continued to fall softly, covering her in a white shroud as her body sank deeper into the cold, immobilizing despair. Her vision blurred again, darkness creeping at the edges. Yet beneath the fog of pain and fear, a fragile spark of resolve flickered. She clenched her fists, summoning what strength she could muster. Her lips parted in a hoarse whisper, trembling out, "Help, someone please." The words dissolved into the vast, indifferent woods unanswered. As her consciousness waned, her mind clung to a single, desperate thought: she had to survive. She needed to be found before the cold, the darkness, or the wilderness claimed her. The snow kept falling, blanketing her in icy silence as her body grew colder. The faint ember of hope flickered, fragile and flickering, like a dying flame. Then a sudden shift in her senses caught her off guard. The faintest sound, a branch cracking under the weight of snow, a distant movement, made her freeze. Her eyes darted wildly, searching the shadows for any sign of threat. Her mind, clouded by pain and exhaustion, struggled to process what she was hearing. Her trembling hand instinctively pressed against her side, clutching at her injured thigh as if to stem the bleeding or stave off the numbness. She tried to call out again, voice barely more than a whisper, but her throat was dry and raw. Silence responded, thick and oppressive, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees. Her eyelids fluttered again, and her breathing grew shallow. She knew she couldn't stay here much longer. Her strength was ebbing, and her vision dimmed at the edges. The cold seeped in her bones, threatening to swallow her whole. She fought to keep her eyes open, to stay alert, knowing that surrender would mean death. A sudden, instinctive movement caught her eye, a faint flicker of movement behind the trees, perhaps a shadow or a figure. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her veins despite her fading strength. Was it rescue? An animal? Or something more sinister? She couldn't tell, but her mind clung to the hope that help was near. She tightened her grip on her side, trying to suppress the trembling that threatened to overwhelm her. Her voice, barely audible, escaped her lips once more. "Help, please." Her words dissolved into the cold air, unanswered, as her eyelids fluttered shut for a moment. When she opened them again, the shadows seemed to stretch closer, darker. The snow continued to fall, unceasing, covering her in a white, silent shroud. Her body grew colder, her muscles numb, and her consciousness flickered like a dying flame. But within her fading awareness, a new understanding took root. She was truly alone, vulnerable, and in desperate need of rescue. The realization pressed down on her, sharper than the pain, sharper than the cold. Suddenly, a faint warmth brushed her cheek, an unexpected, almost imperceptible touch. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see a dark figure moving cautiously through the trees, their silhouette outlined against the snow. Her heart jolted with a flicker of hope, however faint. Was this a rescuer or an adversary? Her mind, clouded and weak, struggled to decide. In her final moments of clarity, she summoned her remaining strength to whisper once more, voice trembling, "Please, don't leave me." The figure drew closer, the snow crunching softly beneath their steps. Her vision blurred completely. The last thing she saw was the faint outline of a face leaning over her, voice muffled but familiar. As darkness overtook her, Elena's awareness faded into the cold, silent wilderness. Yet, somewhere deep inside, the faintest hope lingered, an ember flickering in the endless winter night. The forest was cloaked in an oppressive darkness. The only light filtering through the dense canopy was the pale, flickering glow of the moon, casting shifting shadows on the snow-covered ground. Elena pressed her back against the rough bark of a fallen log, her grip tightening on the sharpened spear she had fashioned from a broken branch. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths, each inhalation catching painfully as she strained to listen. The cold seeped into her bones, numbing her fingers, yet her focus sharpened on every rustle and crack in the underbrush beyond her hiding spot. A series of heavy, deliberate footsteps crushed through the snow, each step resonating with purpose. Along with them came low, guttural growls that vibrated through the silent woods, making her skin crawl. She could feel the primal scenting, the faint tremors of anticipation in the air as predators prowled nearby. Her knuckles whitened around her spear as her eyes darted anxiously, searching for any sign of movement, any indication of where they might strike. A sudden gust of wind carried a pungent mixture of damp fur and musk, drifting toward her like a warning. Her stomach clenched as realization dawned. These were no ordinary wolves. The animals had come closer, their heightened senses alerting them to her presence, her vulnerability. She froze, barely breathing, blending into the shadows, trying to remain unseen. The snarling grew more insistent, punctuated by the occasional sharp bark. Elena could almost hear the flick of their ears, the tense muscles beneath their thick fur as they circled her hiding place. Her ears strained to pick up any distinct pattern in their movements, but all she could detect was the relentless, rhythmic pounding of paws on snow, like a heartbeat echoing her own mounting anxiety. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as she crouched behind her cover, muscles taut and her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. Every second felt like an eternity, each noise a potential threat. She knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. Her survival depended on her patience and her ability to remain silent. Rushing out would guarantee death, but waiting too long risked exhaustion or discovery. A sudden shift in the wind brought a sharper, more concentrated scent, closer, more urgent. The wolves had picked up her trail, their noses working tirelessly to zero in on her position. Through the darkness, she glimpsed the faint glint of eyes reflecting the scarce moonlight, watching her, testing her resolve. The predator's patience was wearing thin. Their growls and sniffing grew more aggressive. Her grip on the spear tightened further. The cold numbed her fingertips, but her resolve hardened. She had endured so much alone, facing dangers that threatened to shatter her spirit. This was no different. She had to make a choice: remain hidden and hope they moved on, or attempt a desperate escape, risking everything in a single, uncertain move. Suddenly, a deep, guttural growl erupted from one of the wolves, louder and more commanding than before. The others responded with snarls, teeth flashing in the darkness. They appear to be debating whether to attack immediately or wait for an easier target. The tension in the air was suffocating, thick enough to cut with a blade. Elena's mind raced as she remembered her cabin, the safety it represented if she could reach it. But rushing now would be reckless. Her years of experience in these woods told her patience was often her best weapon, even when instinct urged her to run. Her pulse hammered louder, echoing in her ears as she made her decision. She slowly shifted her weight, pressing her back further against the rough bark, muscles coiling like a spring. Her eyes flicked toward the narrow gap between the trees, calculating the distance, the risks. She knew her chances depended on remaining silent, invisible. A sudden gust of wind again carried her scent toward the pack. The wolves' ears flicked back, their eyes narrowing as they registered her presence. One of them let out a sharp, piercing bark, a signal to the others. The pack froze, sensing the shift in the game. Elena's chest tightened painfully. Her instincts screamed at her to bolt, but her body refused to obey just yet. Instead, she held her breath, muscles tense and coiled, waiting for the perfect moment. She could see the faint outline of a wolf's head watching her, its eyes gleaming with intelligence and patience. The alpha, larger and darker than the rest, growled again, a deep, commanding sound that seemed to cut through the night. Then, unexpectedly, the pack melted into the shadows, slipping away into the darkness of the woods, their silhouettes dissolving as they lost interest. Elena exhaled slowly, her body trembling with relief and adrenaline. She stayed crouched for a moment longer, listening to the fading sounds of paw steps and distant snarls. When she finally moved, it was with utmost caution, rising quietly, slipping into the cover of the trees, her eyes fixed on the ground ahead. This encounter had granted her a fleeting reprieve, but she knew it was only temporary. The forest remained treacherous, and the night was far from over. Her muscles ached from the tension, and her mind was racing with questions and plans. She needed to reach her cabin, secure herself, and ensure the wolves' visit wouldn't escalate into something more deadly. Every step was deliberate, silent, as she navigated through the snow-laden terrain. The biting cold stung her skin, but her focus was unshakable. Fear no longer controlled her. Instead, determination fueled her movements. This was her domain, her territory, and she would do whatever it took to survive and to uncover what the wolves' presence truly meant for her future. As she moved deeper into the woods, she realized her understanding of the pack had shifted. They hadn't come solely for prey, but seemed to be patrolling, perhaps connected to a larger threat lurking nearby. Her knowledge of the forest's secrets deepened, and with it, her resolve to confront whatever dangers awaited, alone, if necessary. The night had changed her, and she was no longer just a survivor hiding from predators. She was becoming a predator herself, learning to read the shadows and anticipate the dangers ahead. The icy wind sliced through the darkness as Elena lay pressed against the damp, sticky snow, her senses strained to their limit. Her body was numb from the cold and injury, muscles stiff and throbbing with each shallow breath. Shadows cloaked the forest around her, broken only by the faint, purposeful glow of a distant headlamp that pierced the night like a beacon of hope and threat. She was painfully aware of their proximity. The faint scent of fuel, mingling with the scent of human warmth, grew more distinct with every heartbeat. Beyond the tangled branches, muffled voices and the shuffle of gear indicated the search party's relentless progress. Her injured side ached fiercely, but her ears remained alert, straining for any sign of movement. She knew she couldn't afford to make a sound or shift her position, lest she betray her hiding spot. A sudden gust of wind shifted the scent, carrying the faint crackle of dry twigs breaking underweight. Elena's heart hammered in her chest as the distant crunch of snow under boots grew louder. Her fists clenched around the worn hunting knife she'd grasped earlier, knuckles whitening. It wasn't much, but it was all she had, her only safeguard against the uncertainty that loomed. As the searchers drew closer, their footsteps became more deliberate, cautious. Elena's eyes darted desperately for an escape route or a concealed nook. The snow beneath her was layered with ice, making any movement perilous. Her mind raced, trying to devise a plan, should she attempt to signal or remain silent and wait. Her injury limited her options, but her survival instincts pushed her to act. She shifted slightly, trying to adjust her position without making noise. Drawing a shaky breath, she whispered into the cold night, her voice hoarse but steady. "Help! Over here!" she managed, her words barely more than a breath. She repeated it louder, pressing her lips into a thin line as she aimed her voice toward the approaching figures. The sound carried briefly through the silent forest, then was swallowed by the vast darkness. For a tense moment, nothing changed. The footsteps paused, and the muffled voices grew sharper, more alert. Elena's pulse pounded relentlessly in her ears. She pressed her palm against the snow, feeling the icy chill seep through her glove, grounding her amidst the chaos. Every second stretched painfully long, a fragile thread holding her fragile hope. Suddenly, a narrow beam of flashlight pierced through the trees, sweeping across the snow with stark clarity. The light sliced through the darkness, illuminating the icy terrain and revealing her faint outline. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The beam stopped just short of her hiding spot, then moved forward, probing. She held her breath, fighting the instinct to flinch, praying her call had been heard. A muffled shout broke the silence, and she saw figures rushing toward her, boots crunching through the snow. One silhouette, clad in thick winter gear, called out her name with urgency. Relief flooded her as the voice echoed again, louder and more insistent. "Elena, we found you." A surge of renewed hope coursed through her veins. Tears threatened to freeze on her cheeks, but she clenched her jaw, refusing to let them fall. The rescue was within reach. The team was closing in. Her fingers tightened around the knife, not out of threat, but as a reflexive safeguard. Every step they took brought her closer to safety, yet her wariness remained. Shadows still lurked, and danger was not entirely gone. The flashlight's beam finally illuminated her partially buried form, limbs tangled but alive. A man's voice commanded her, more insistent now. "Stay still. We're right here." Several pairs of boots encircled her, one kneeling to assess her injuries, another shining a light directly into her face. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting the compassionate but focused gaze of a rescuer. Relief washed over her, yet a lingering tension remained. The wolves could return at any moment, and her injuries left her vulnerable. She clung to the fragile hope that the worst was over, for now. As the team gently helped her to sit upright, Elena caught sight of the dark woods stretching behind them, silent once more. Though the immediate threat had been thwarted, she knew the shadows still lurked beneath the surface of her fragile peace. The forest menace had not been eradicated, only momentarily pushed back. Her injuries, the cold, and the uncertain future weighed heavily on her mind. The rescue had changed her situation. She was no longer hidden and helpless, but her journey was far from over. Her knowledge of the forest's dangers had deepened, and her understanding of her own resilience had sharpened. She now realized that her survival depended not only on luck or help, but on her own capacity to adapt and remain vigilant. The cold wind still whispered through the trees, but warmth seeped in her chest from the presence of her rescuers. She felt a flicker of something new, resolve. The shadows might always threaten her, but she had taken a step toward confronting them. The fragile thread of hope was now woven into a stronger resolve to survive, to trust, and to find a way out of her darkness. As they began to move her away from the icy ground, Elena's gaze lingered on the forest behind them. It remained silent, watching, but she understood now. The battle was not just against external threats, but also within herself. The forest shadows would always be there, waiting. Yet, she had gained a new awareness, an inner strength that no darkness could entirely extinguish. The chapter closed with Elena being carried towards safety, her body battered, but her spirit subtly altered. The immediate danger was averted, but her understanding of her vulnerability and resilience had deepened. She knew her fight was ongoing, but she was no longer just a victim hiding in the shadows. She was a survivor, beginning to reclaim her strength amid the cold, dark woods. The howling wind tore through the battered walls of the small vehicle as it lurched forward, snowflakes streaking past the windows in frantic white blurs. Elena's fingers clenched the seat's edge, her breath fogging the glass as she cast a quick glance in the rearview mirror. Behind her, the shadows of towering pines flickered in the storm's fury, their dark silhouettes jagged against the swirling snow. The distant growls of wolves still echoed faintly, a haunting reminder that danger lurked just beyond her sight. The engine roared louder, forcing its way through the thick snow that had already blanketed the narrow road in a relentless white shroud. Inside, Elena's heart hammered painfully against her ribs, each jolt of the vehicle reminding her of her fragile situation. The cold air seeped through the cracks in the vehicle's frame, wrapping her in a shroud of icy dread. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, eyes fixed on the receding forest behind her. But her mind refused to release the haunting sounds, the snarls, the oppressive silence, the primal tension that had held her hostage moments before. A shiver coursed down her spine as she remembered the wolf's eyes, vivid, calculating, unyielding, glinting in the darkness. They had watched her leave, unmoving, as if measuring her, weighing her weakness. Her stomach clenched, not from the cold, but from the gnawing certainty that the forest was not finished with her yet. The storm's howling masked the faintest rustling, the whisper of branches, or perhaps something else, something unseen, slipping away into the shadows. The vehicle's tires hissed over a patch of ice, and Elena instinctively tightened her grip on the seatbelt. Her fingers trembled, not solely from the cold. She had escaped, yes, but the bitterness of relief lingered. How long before the forest's secrets caught up with her again? How many more dangers lurked just beyond her perception, waiting patiently beneath the snow or hidden within the darkness? She knew the woods had a way of swallowing silence, concealing threats in its depths, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her gaze flickered to the snow-covered landscape rushing past. The trees appeared distorted, blurred by the relentless storm, yet she could still make out faint, jagged marks on the snow, the remnants of her hurried trail, now partially obscured by fresh snowfall. She wondered if the wolf pack had moved on or if they still watched her, hidden in the shadows, their presence lingering like a scar on the frozen wilderness. A sudden jolt caused the vehicle to lurch again, jarring her forward. Elena gasped, her stomach twisting as she pressed her forehead more firmly against the cold glass. Dizziness threatened to overtake her, but she fought it, clutching her injured leg beneath her layers of clothing. The dull ache from her fall persisted, but now it flared anew, sharp and insistent. Her hand instinctively pressed to her thigh, feeling the tight bandage beneath her glove, a fragile barrier against the pain. The storm's ferocity made every movement uncertain, each jolt a threat to her fragile stability. The distant growls still echoed faintly in her mind, a constant reminder that she was not yet safe. Her thoughts raced. What if the wolves decided to follow her? Could they sense her fear, her vulnerability? Would they strike again, or had the storm scattered them into the darkness? She clung to the hope that the snow and wind might have driven them away, that her pursuers had lost her trail for now. Yet, the forest was unpredictable, and her instincts warned her not to trust in temporary safety. Her fingers brushed the small, battered radio tucked into her coat pocket. She hesitated, knowing it was unlikely to work in this weather, but the faint hope of contacting help kept her hand hovering over the device. She was aware that the storm's interference might drown out any signal, but she couldn't abandon it entirely. The snowstorm raged on, relentless and unforgiving. Visibility had dropped to mere feet, the outside world reduced to swirling chaos. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, illusions or perhaps real threats lurking just beyond the white curtain. Her eyes darted between the road and the mirror, searching for signs of pursuit or danger, her breath quickening with each passing second. Suddenly, the vehicle hit a deeper rut, causing Elena to gasp again. Her stomach lurched, and she pressed her forehead harder against the glass, fighting the dizziness. The storm's fury made her feel insignificant, a fragile speck against the vast wilderness. But amid the chaos, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. She had survived the wolves, the fall, the cold. She had faced the darkness and escaped, even if only temporarily. She stole a glance at her reflection in the glass, a pale, tense face framed by tangled hair, eyes wide with exhaustion and determination. The haunting stare of the wolves still lingered in her mind, yet she refused to surrender to fear. Somewhere deep inside, a stubborn resolve took root. She would not let the forest claim her, not without a fight. As the vehicle plunged into a deeper snowdrift, Elena's grip on the seat tightened. The storm showed no signs of weakening, and neither did her journey into the unknown. She realized her ordeal was far from over. The woods still held their secrets, waiting silently beneath the swirling white. The night stretched endlessly before her, filled with dangers, but her purpose remained clear. She must reach safety, whatever that might mean in this frozen, merciless landscape. A faint, distant howl cut through the storm's roar, a chilling echo that seemed to slice through the chaos. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it another pack, or something else entirely? She couldn't tell, but the sound intensified her unease. Her eyes darted again to the dark horizon, searching, listening. And then, in the silence that followed, realization dawned. Her escape was only a temporary reprieve. The forest's grip was still there, waiting patiently, shadows ready to swallow her once more. She steeled herself against the icy fear, knowing that what lay ahead would demand every ounce of her strength and instinct. The vehicle surged forward, snow blurring the landscape into a swirling, white infinity. Elena's mind clung to the image of the wolves, watching, waiting, while her body moved instinctively, driven by the primal need to survive. The night stretched endlessly before her, but deep inside, a fragile ember of hope flickered, a stubborn light refusing to go out. The distant hum of the town gradually faded as Elena pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window. Outside, the snow-covered mountains stretched into the gray horizon, their peaks cloaked in mist and silence. The world she once knew seemed distant, like echoes of chaos and danger she had narrowly escaped. Now, only the quiet hum of her small apartment and the faint crackle of a dying fire filled the space, yet her mind refused to settle. Her gaze lingered on the icy landscape, her thoughts swirling like the wind outside. The wolves, those piercing eyes, primal growls, remained vivid in her memory, haunting her with their raw presence. She replayed the forest moments, the decision to stay, the hesitation, the instinct to run. The realization that she had come so close to losing everything gnawed at her, stirring a restless ache deep within her chest. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a mug of tea, the warmth contrasting sharply with the lingering cold in her bones. Guilt prickled her skin. Had she been reckless? Or was her intuition simply too stubborn to ignore? The forest had tested her limits, forcing her to confront vulnerabilities she had long suppressed. Yet, amid the fear, a flicker of something else ignited, an unwavering resolve. She could not stay away forever. The bond she felt with that wild, unforgiving land was too profound to ignore. Her connection to the wilderness was no longer just curiosity, but a duty. She shifted position, her gaze drifting to a small, worn map pinned to the wall. Faint lines and symbols marked her territory and the places she had visited. Her finger traced the routes, imagining the paths she could take, the trails yet to explore. The decision crystallized: she would return, not out of reckless curiosity, but because her role as protector had become vital. The fragile balance of that ecosystem depended on her presence, her understanding, her guardianship. A deep breath steadied her nerves. She knew the risks. The forest would be more perilous now. Her absence could leave injured animals vulnerable and the ecosystem more exposed. But she also understood her presence served as a shield. Her absence might invite threats. Humans seeking to exploit the land, predators sensing weakness, or unseen dangers lurking beneath the snow's surface. Her return was necessary. Her hand moved to her coat, and she began gathering supplies: warm layers, a flashlight, a sturdy knife, a compact first aid kit. Each item was packed deliberately, a quiet ritual of preparation. As she worked, her mind raced with questions. Would the wolves still be watching? Had her previous actions disturbed the delicate harmony of the woods? Or had she, perhaps, made a difference in some unseen way? The uncertainty pressed down like the winter sky outside, heavy and oppressive. The clock on the wall indicated late evening, yet sleep eluded her. Her thoughts drifted to the wolf pup she had rescued, the fragile, dependent creature. She wondered if it had survived the storm, if it was warm and safe now. The image of its trembling body, eyes wide with fear, lingered. That small life had rekindled her purpose, igniting a desire to return, not just as an observer, but as a guardian. Stepping outside her door, Elena paused briefly, listening. The town was hushed, no sirens, no distant voices, only the whisper of wind through empty streets. Snow crunched softly beneath her boots as she moved toward her car, tucked away in a shadowed alley. The vehicle was old but dependable, a steadfast companion for her solitary journeys. She brushed snow from the windshield, started the engine, and felt the heater sputter to life, casting a warm glow in the cold night. Driving away from the town, the lights faded into darkness, swallowed by the blanket of snow and shadow. The road wound through the frozen landscape, each mile bringing her closer to the forest she knew intimately. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, muscles tense, senses heightened. Every flicker of movement, every shadow outside the window seemed amplified in her alertness. Her thoughts returned to the wolves, those fierce, enigmatic predators. She remembered their howls, the way their presence shifted the entire atmosphere of the woods. Her connection to them was complex, fear intertwined with admiration. Could she truly understand them? Or was her compassion a vulnerability that could be exploited? The questions spun through her mind, yet she trusted her instincts more than ever. As she neared her territory's edge, the trees grew denser, darker, their branches reaching like claws into the night sky. The snow here was deeper, undisturbed except for her footprints, evidence of her return. She slowed the car, scanning the shadows carefully, her breath forming icy clouds. Suddenly, movement caught her eye, a fleeting shadow slipping behind a cluster of pines. Her heartbeat quickened, but her hands remained steady. Perhaps it was just a fox or a gust of wind. Still, her senses sharpened. She reached for her binoculars, peering into the darkness. The figure was too quick to identify, but the feeling of being watched persisted. She parked behind a thick thicket, stepping out into the snow. The silence was thick, broken only by rustling leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Elena moved cautiously, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow, every muscle tense. The forest was alive with subtle signs, rabbits scurrying, an owl's distant hoot, the faint crack of ice underfoot. Her gaze flickered, scanning the darkness for movement, her senses on high alert. Her coat was pulled tighter as her breath fogged in the cold air. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had come back to protect, to understand, to forge a new bond with this wilderness. Yet, beneath her resolve, doubts lingered. Would her presence bring peace or stir further conflict? Could she maintain the fragile trust she was rebuilding? A distant howl pierced the night, sharp and piercing. The sound was both a warning and a summons. Elena froze, listening intently. The call reaffirmed her choice. She was part of this world now, woven into its unpredictable fabric. Her future depended on walking the line between human and beast, protector and outsider. She turned back toward her car, her mind resolute. The night stretched before her, filled with shadows and secrets. Climbing into the driver's seat, her fingers curled around the steering wheel. The decision was clear. She would return to the forest, stronger and more aware than before. The wolf's eyes, the lurking dangers, her own guilt and hope, all had intertwined into a single purpose. The engine purred softly as she drove into the darkness, leaving behind the distant town and heading back into the wild. The mountains loomed ahead, silent guardians watching over her journey. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that she was no longer an outsider. She was an integral part of this land's fragile, relentless balance, and she would do everything in her power to preserve it. Elena's breath fogged in the crisp morning air as she cautiously stepped onto the snow-dusted ground outside her cabin. The forest around her was hushed, the silence almost tangible, broken only by the faint drip of melting ice and the distant groan of branches surrendering to the warming sun. Her eyes swept the clearing, focusing on the fresh signs that might reveal recent activity. The scent of thawing snow mingled with the earthy aroma of damp pine and decomposing leaves, grounding her in the moment. She moved slowly, her boots pressing softly against the icy crust, each step deliberate. Her gaze fixed on the ground, where narrow, elongated paw prints pressed into the white powder. The tracks were recent, yet not frantic, implying the animal had paused, perhaps sensing her presence. Elena crouched, brushing aside a thin layer of snow with trembling fingers, her eyes narrowing as she examined the prints. They led toward the denser part of the forest, winding between roots and fallen branches. A subtle shift in the breeze carried a faint, musky scent, wet fur, perhaps, or the residual smell of a creature that had recently passed through. She inhaled sharply, recognizing it from previous encounters, but today it seemed subdued, less urgent. The animal scent no longer screamed flight. Instead, it hinted at hesitation, maybe even curiosity. Perhaps it had sensed her and decided to hold its ground, watching from a distance. This possibility sparked a flicker of cautious hope. Maybe the danger was diminishing. Her hand instinctively rested on the strap of her backpack, where a small, sharpened stick was tucked. Not enough for a confrontation with a wolf, but potentially useful for self-defense if necessary. She cast a wary glance around, her senses sharpened. The trees swayed gently, their branches heavy with melting snow, shadows flickering among the leaves as sunlight pierced through the clouds. The forest's quiet was weighted, less a threat, more an uncertain calm. A sudden movement among the trees caught her eye, a flicker of shadow, quick and subtle. Her breath hitched, muscles tensing instinctively. She froze, focusing intently, every nerve alert. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a branch snapped, loud enough to break the silence. Her muscles coiled, readying her for anything. But after a tense pause, nothing emerged. Only the whisper of leaves stirred by the breeze. Elena exhaled slowly, the tension ebbing from her shoulders. She reached out and pressed her palm against the rough bark of a nearby tree, grounding herself, steadying her racing thoughts. She knew the creature might still be nearby, hidden, watching, waiting, or perhaps it had moved on, sensing her cautious presence was no longer a threat. Still, her mind kept racing through possibilities. She shifted her gaze toward the horizon, where patches of snow had begun to melt into earth and new green shoots poked through the soil. Signs of spring's slow approach were unmistakable, life stirring beneath the cold veneer. The faint scent of water and fresh growth grew stronger as she remained still, trying to interpret what these signs revealed about her surroundings. A gentle gust of wind carried a new, softer scent. Musk mingled with something sweeter, perhaps a fragment of fur or a scrape of claws against bark. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from a cautious curiosity. Could it be the same animal, hesitant yet resilient? Or was this a different creature altogether, an intruder, an ally, or perhaps a predator lying in wait? She straightened, her eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Her body relaxed slightly, but her mind stayed alert. The forest was neither entirely hostile nor safe. It was a place of fragile balance. She understood that peace here was fleeting, an illusion she could cling to only briefly. The signs of recent activity suggested a creature that had learned to survive amid constant threats, predators, humans, and the unpredictable terrain alike. Suddenly, a flicker of movement among the trees drew her attention. Her breath caught again, muscles tensing. A small branch snapped somewhere deeper in the woods, loud enough to stir the quiet. Her grip on her makeshift weapon tightened, her senses sharpening. But again, nothing appeared, only the rustling leaves as the wind shifted direction. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from her limbs. Her hand lingered on the rough bark of the tree, grounding herself once more. She studied the trail, weighing her options. The signs pointed to a fragile calm, yet she knew better than to trust it completely. The forest silence was deceptive. Danger could lurk just beyond sight. Her fingers closed around the strap of her backpack, reassurance flooding her. She decided to follow the trail a little further, not out of reckless curiosity, but driven by a sense of responsibility. If the creature was nearby, injured or exhausted, it needed her help now more than ever. Perhaps in aiding it, she could find a new purpose, something beyond mere survival. As she moved forward, her gaze remained fixed on the faint footprints fading into the undergrowth. The forest's quiet acceptance offered a glimmer of hope, a recognition that life persisted despite lurking shadows. She was no longer just an outsider observing from the margins. She was part of this fragile, awakening world. Whatever lay ahead along the trail, she was prepared to face it, her senses alert and her resolve steady. The tracks led her deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmer. With each step, Elena felt a shift, an awareness that her understanding of the forest and herself was expanding. The signs of recent activity, the cautious animal's presence, and her own resolve intertwined into a new narrative. She was no longer merely avoiding threats. She was beginning to accept her role within this ecosystem, ready to confront whatever awaited her, be it danger, discovery, or connection. By the time she reached a small clearing, she noticed fresh signs, broken twigs, a faint scrape on a tree trunk, and disturbed earth. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a renewed sense of purpose. The creature might still be nearby, injured or hiding, waiting for help or simply observing her. Her decision to follow the trail had changed her situation. She now understood that her actions could influence the outcome. The forest had shifted from a place of silent threat to one of fragile opportunity. Elena knelt, examining the ground more closely. She spotted a faint trail of disturbed snow leading toward a thicket. Her senses sharpened, and she moved silently, her mind focused on the possibility of finding the creature, alive, wary, but resilient. She knew that her next move could be crucial, not just for the animal, but for her own understanding of this wilderness and her place within it. As she pressed forward, the forest seemed to hold its breath, awaiting her next step. Shadows flickered, leaves whispered, and the scent of life grew stronger. Elena felt a quiet resolve settle within her, an acknowledgement that her journey was only beginning and that her actions now would shape her path ahead. With each step, she embraced the uncertainty, ready to face whatever challenges and revelations lay in wait. Elena pressed her back against the rough bark of the pine, her breath steadying as she listened intently. The forest around her was cloaked in darkness, broken only by the distant, haunting cry of a lone wolf echoing through the trees. Shadows flickered under the pale glow of the moon, casting fleeting silhouettes across the snow-covered ground. phantoms that seemed almost alive. Her eyes flicked from one movement to another, searching for the source of the sound, her muscles taut with anticipation. The cold seeped through her layers of clothing, biting into her skin, but her focus remained unshaken. Every rustle of branches, every subtle shift of snow felt magnified in the tense silence. She had learned long ago that the forest's whispers could conceal both threats and secrets, and tonight she needed to interpret their meaning with precision. Her hand instinctively grasped the battered spear at her side, the only weapon she trusted in this wilderness, and tightened her grip. The howl came again, closer this time, more insistent. A shiver ran down her spine, yet she kept her breathing even, suppressing the instinct to panic. Her mind replayed her previous encounters, moments of danger, times when her patience and observation had been her only salvation. No rushing, no reckless moves, only quiet awareness. Suddenly, her sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement behind a cluster of snow-laden branches. She froze, narrowing her eyes to analyze. The shadows shifted cautiously, tentative yet deliberate. They moved with a careful grace, almost as if testing her presence, gauging whether she was a threat or a part of the landscape. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, remaining rooted. The moonlight revealed the contours of the forest, silver patches illuminating the snow and the outlines of trees. Then she saw them, a pair of glowing amber eyes, reflecting the sparse light, blinking softly before vanishing behind the trunks. Her stomach clenched with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Was this the same wolf she had sensed earlier? Or was it another creature, more unpredictable, more dangerous? Her gaze dropped to the snow at her feet. Tiny paw prints wove through the white expanse, leading toward her hiding spot. The tracks were fresh, unspoiled by wind or time, indicating recent activity. Her mind raced, weighing her options. Should she remain concealed, waiting for the animals to lose interest? Or should she attempt to follow the trail, seeking to understand what was unfolding in this fragile night world? A gust of wind stirred the branches, carrying a faint, primal scent, frost, pine, and something deeper, more instinctual. Her nose twitched involuntarily. The scent told her that predators were nearby, possibly watching her from the shadows. Her grip on the spear tightened slightly, but she resisted the urge to leap up and flee, knowing her movement could betray her position. A soft sound sliced through the silence, a faint rustling like a whisper behind her. Her muscles tensed further, heart pounding with cautious alertness. She dared not turn her head, aware that movement might reveal her hiding spot. Instead, she focused on the subtle noises, the faint shuffle of snow, the almost inaudible crack of branches under shifting weight. Minutes stretched endlessly. The forest seemed to hold its breath alongside her, the stillness pressing in from all sides. Every breath was measured, every heartbeat deliberate. She recalled past moments of vulnerability, times when fear had nearly overwhelmed her, and times when patience had been her only shield. Then, a distant howl broke the quiet again, softer and more melodic than before. It sounded less like a warning and more like a plea, an invitation for connection. Elena's eyes shimmered with a mixture of longing and understanding. Despite her wariness, she felt a flicker of kinship with this creature, an acknowledgement of shared solitude and resilience. To her left, a movement caught her eye. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, gliding cautiously toward her hiding spot. Her breath hitched, fingers trembling as she instinctively tightened her grip on the spear. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, neither threatening nor fleeing, just curious. Under the moonlight, she saw the lean form of a wolf, alert, cautious, its fur shimmering faintly. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken exchange, a fragile recognition amid the shadows. Elena held her breath, uncertain whether the animal sensed her intent or simply acknowledged her presence. The wolf paused a few paces away, sniffed the air, then settled onto the snow, curling its tail around its paws. A wave of relief washed over her, tempered by the understanding that this was only a fleeting moment of peace in a landscape riddled with danger. The night stretched on in silence, filled with mutual observation and unspoken communication. Elena knew she couldn't stay here forever, but for now, she had glimpsed a fragile harmony, born from patience, careful observation, and acceptance of her place within this ecosystem. As the wolf lifted its head and emitted a soft, almost purring sound, Elena felt a shift within herself. The fears that had haunted her, of loneliness, intrusion, losing control, began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet conviction. She was part of this wilderness, bound by unspoken rules and shared existence. The shadows flickered once more, then receded into the darkness. The wolf, with a final glance, melted into the night. Elena remained rooted, listening to the fading echoes of its call, feeling the weight of her choices settle into her bones. The forest was alive, unpredictable and unforgiving, but she was no longer an outsider. She belonged here in this delicate, silent balance. The moon climbed higher, casting a brighter glow over the snow. The distant howls softened into whispers, a lullaby of the wild. Elena exhaled slowly, a faint smile touching her lips. Her journey had entered a new phase, one where trust, patience, and acceptance would shape her place in this untamed world. And perhaps, amidst the shadows dancing beneath the pale light, she had found a way to coexist with the wilderness rather than fight against it. The first warm rays of spring filtered through the dense canopy, casting patches of dappled light onto the forest floor. The snow had finally melted away, revealing a landscape bursting with life, tender shoots pushing through the moist earth and buds swelling on the branches. The air vibrated with a lively chorus of returning birds, their songs weaving into the gentle rustling of leaves. Elena stood quietly at the edge of a small clearing, her breath forming fleeting clouds in the crisp morning air. Her gaze traced the movement of a pair of robins darting from branch to branch, their feathers shimmering in the sunlight. A subtle shift in the atmosphere drew her attention. The oppressive silence that had marked her days was giving way to a symphony of awakening life. She inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of damp earth and blooming flora. a familiar reminder of the cycles she had observed countless times before. Yet this year, something was different. A quiet hope stirred within her, an instinct that perhaps the land was healing, that resilience was returning despite the scars left by winter's harsh grip. Elena moved cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the softening ground. Her fingers brushed against the rough bark of a nearby pine, feeling the textured surface beneath her fingertips as she listened to the orchestra of sounds. A nearby brook gurgled merrily, its waters slipping over smooth stones worn by years of flowing. She crouched to examine a patch of moss, lush and vibrant, thriving in the shaded dampness. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the serenity seep into her, grounding her in the steady pulse of nature's resilience. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the calm. Her senses sharpened instinctively. She turned her head sharply, eyes scanning the underbrush. A small creature darted into view, a squirrel, its tail flicking nervously. It scurried across the leaf litter, gathering bits of bark and buds into its tiny paws. Elena's lips curled into a soft smile, a rare flicker of lightness crossing her face. This fleeting moment of vitality, the squirrel's cautious activity, reminded her of the fragile balance of life here. It was a sign that the land was stirring, awakening from its winter slumber. Her gaze lifted to the canopy above, where leaves unfurled like green banners against the pale blue sky. The sun's warmth kissed her cheeks, invigorating her. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp, fragrant air. The weight of her worries, of past fears, seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. Her place was here, among these awakening woods, part of this ongoing cycle of renewal. A faint, deliberate sound drew her attention again. She turned toward a thicket of young saplings, where a subtle movement flickered at the edge of her vision. Her hand instinctively reached into her pocket, fingers closing around a small, weathered pendant she carried, an old token of luck and reassurance. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from a renewed resolve. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing to better observe the faint outline of a figure among the trees. As she approached, she recognized the form of a deer, its coat dappled with spots, blending seamlessly into the fresh greenery. The animal paused, ears twitching, sensing her presence but not fleeing. Elena froze, watching the creature graze peacefully on tender shoots. Gratitude washed over her. This fragile moment of coexistence, a sign that life persisted despite hardships. She lowered her voice, whispering softly, "You're safe here." The deer lifted its head, meeting her gaze with gentle, cautious eyes. For a heartbeat, they exchanged a silent understanding, an unspoken connection forged through mutual recognition. Elena felt her shoulders relax, the tension of past dangers dissolving into the harmony of the forest. She extended her hand slowly, offering a silent promise. The deer responded with a delicate step closer, sniffing the air, then returning to its feeding. This quiet exchange shifted her perspective. The sounds of the forest grew richer, chirping insects, the distant cry of a hawk circling high above, the faint ripple of water over stones. Each detail reinforced her sense of belonging, anchoring her to this moment of rebirth. She realized she could no longer remain detached. The land had become intertwined with her soul. It was a sanctuary demanding her guardianship. Her gaze wandered across the clearing, noticing signs of growth everywhere. Clusters of buds on shrubs, fresh shoots piercing the soil, wildflowers beginning to push through the leaf litter. A new feeling stirred within her, a desire to nurture, to protect what was fragile and vital. The forest was awakening, and with this awakening came a sense of purpose. She understood her role was shifting from passive observer to active participant in this renewal. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying a faint, sweet scent of blossoms and earth. Elena closed her eyes briefly, allowing the sensation to settle deep inside her. She recognized that her responsibility extended beyond mere observation. She was now a part of this ongoing cycle. Her fingers brushed the pendant again, a steadying touch, a reminder of her commitment to this place. In that moment, a decision crystallized within her. She would stay. The wilderness had claimed her heart, and she would not abandon it. Her life, once marked by solitude and cautious distance, was becoming woven into the fabric of this land's rebirth. She stepped back slowly, her presence unobtrusive, watching as the forest responded in kind. As the sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows and illuminating the vibrant tapestry of life around her, Elena felt a profound sense of acceptance. She was no longer merely surviving within these woods. She was becoming an integral part of their story. The future remained uncertain, but she knew her place was here, among the awakening trees and singing birds, embracing the endless cycle of renewal and hope. Suddenly, a distant crack echoed through the trees. Elena's eyes snapped toward the sound. A fallen branch had shifted beneath the weight of new growth, revealing a faint trail of disturbed earth. Her instincts flared. She stepped cautiously toward it, noting the fresh impressions, claw marks, torn leaves. Someone or something had recently passed through here, perhaps a predator or a newcomer. Her mind raced, weighing her options. She knelt to examine the trail more closely, recognizing the faint imprint of a paw pad, larger than a fox's, smaller than a wolf's. She caught a whiff of unfamiliar scent, something sharper, more pungent than the usual forest aromas. Her pulse quickened, not out of fear, but a sense of alertness. She realized that the forest's quiet awakening might be disturbed sooner than she expected. Her previous hope was now tinged with cautious awareness. Clutching her pendant tightly, Elena decided to follow the trail at a safe distance, moving silently through the underbrush. Her goal was no longer just observation, but understanding. She needed to know what or who had entered her sanctuary. As she pressed forward, she reflected on her newfound role: protector, observer, and now, perhaps, mediator between the land and whatever threat or opportunity lay ahead. The trail led her toward a denser part of the forest, where shadows grew thicker and the light dimmer. She paused behind a thicket, peering into the gloom. A faint movement caught her eye, something small and cautious, perhaps a creature hiding from the disturbance. Her mind raced again, Was this a sign of danger or an opportunity to forge a new alliance? She hesitated briefly, then stepped into the shadows, ready to face whatever was coming. In this moment of uncertainty, Elena's resolve hardened. She understood that her journey was far from over. The forest's renewal was intertwined with her own. Whatever challenges awaited, she would meet them with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the winter's darkness. The land had begun to heal, and now, so would she, steadfast, vigilant, and committed to the ongoing story of rebirth.